using Bitcoin or some of
here, and the interest is escalating.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I've gotten interested in it myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty funny.
Mhm.
In fact, just the other day I met the real Dave.
Oh, so that was you. We were discussing who it was that met Doge.
Yeah, I met Dave. That was amazing. Well, anyway, so to tell you this, because even though I happen to, we live in revolutionary times. Money is being reintroduced by the market. And the bank officers were all just kind of looking around at each other, and then sort of got the question, because none of them had a clue. And the bank president finally came to us. We have an ancient contract.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty obvious that cryptocurrency is going to replace now. It's as obvious as the fact that email will replace or that something like Netflix will replace video. It's just better technology. And my argument is essentially that the reason it's better technology is because it was invented by the Pilot study. The remarkable thing is that this happened at Apple, which nobody really imagined that it would ever stop. 10 years ago, there's not a single economist alive who would predict that. Certainly no scientist, no major breakthrough theorist who's anything but unimaginable. Some people speculated about the possibility, but nobody imagined it. It all came about through the price certain. Does anybody know the exact date that actually the license was signed? Maybe you remember what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Since I've been in Apple, start off with the next and it all happened because now you wouldn't think that a robot technology would go to the better spot, but the housing crisis was so overinflated and the banks so with mortgage backed securities that suddenly they get to be enormously valuable. That's the last. The bad is the most thing you can do with, you know, the cost of life. George Bush, came on national television 2 weeks ago. Travel, and it was really incredible. How serious it was, I guess I never did that. Hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's just a big discussion, but we see what the World Cup is about. And even after economy. Now, why did all this happen? The left blames the view of capitalism, the Wall Street wants the evil and blah, blah, blah. I mean, the ultimate reason why this that happened is because the government has nationalized the money and cartelized it. By cartelized, I mean given privileged legal position in certain firms as versus having normal competitors. We don't have a competitive system. We like to pretend that we have freedom cards, but I mean, to the extent that freedom cards exist at all, it's only on half of every economic transaction. That. But the other half, namely the money half, has been completely nationalized by government. It was the money that failed in 2008. It wasn't capitalism. It was the money that failed. And it was only the beginning. I mean, you look back over 100 years, the money has failed again and again. The money failed in the late 70s with hyperinflation and inflation. It failed in the early 1970s when Nixon took us off the Ronald Reagan was founded. It failed during World War II when gold backing was suspended. It failed during the Great Depression when when the economy collapsed and FDR actually confiscated gold from the American people. It failed in 1920 and 1921 when there was a Great Recession, and it failed during World War I itself. So there was a huge inflation and inflation as well, and conversion to gold. So I mean, money has been failing for 100 years now, again and again and again, and yet we continue to pretend as if we have this good system. We don't. And it's exactly what you expect. If the government in charge of anything, it will fail. Absolutely no question. And we know this from experience, we know this from economic theory. So we've had this terrible problem. Now, throughout the course of the century, we've had a lot of people who've been advocating change. We've got to do something about this problem. We keep going the wrong direction. Instead of having commodity-backed money, it keeps migrating ever more towards paper. And the more paper dominates the monetary system, the more it can be infinitely reproduced. The more it's infinitely reproduced, the more distorted things get. The lower interest rates, the more the Fed pushes interest rates down low, the more it punishes saving. We all know this now. Hardly any of us are saving any money at all anymore, because like, what's the point, actually? Because you can't make any money by saving money anymore. So we don't have savings. We think much more short term. We're a very materialistic culture, consumerist oriented. We value stuff over saving. Our capital stock is being whittled down to virtually nothing because of the Fed and its low interest rate policies. So paper money is a very bad system. So lots of really good economists have been advocating reform for 100 years. Like, let's go back to a gold standard. Let's have a dollar that you can convert into commodity money, limited in its stock, that the government can't. So the government can't run endless amounts of debt and become huge amounts of debt. This Leviathan would have to trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. You know, it's very amusing to me that Congress pretends to try to balance the budget and actually watch itself and to spend less money. But you know what? Congress doesn't have to actually worry about this. As long as there's a Fed to bail us out, print the money, it just doesn't matter. I mean, all the talk you hear about limiting the budget and cutting the budget and everything, it's all nonsense. You can just completely ignore it. Because so long as there's a Federal Reserve there to completely print all the money the government wants to spend, then we're going to get an unlimited Leviathan state. I mean, the Fed is what's made this possible. And what does the Leviathan state mean? It means the diminution of human liberty. I mean, the reason we're not as free as we used to be is because government is bigger than it used to be. The reason it's bigger is because it can afford to be so by endlessly printing money instead of taxing us. So in the end, the unsoundness of the money, the nationalization of the money, is the reason we've lost our liberty. And it's the reason for Leviathan state. It's the reason for all the great evils. I would say the fundamental reason for most of the evils in American politics today. Well, in 2008, it just became too much. And one code-slinging geek named Satoshi Nakamoto came up with the idea of inventing a new form of money. And nobody knows who this is, actually. We don't know, contrary to what Newsweek magazine says this week. The final disgrace of the mainstream American media is this story that appeared in Newsweek.
There will be many more.
There will be many more. But it's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I mean, they sort of drag some, train collecting physicist, a Japanese guy who barely speaks English, out of retirement. It's you're Satoshi, and put him on the cover of Newsweek magazine. And it's all very sad, very pathetic, and it's obviously a case of mistaken identity. Nobody knows who Satoshi is. I may have met him myself. I don't really know, because whoever he is disappeared about 3 years ago. And although he reemerged, I guess 2 weeks ago to deny this Newsweek story, which is great because it means he's still alive. So,
how do we know it was him that emerged?
He verified his identity. It was the same account with the P2P Foundation.
Okay.
He put out a little note. So it encouraged everybody. I'm glad we don't really ever want to know who Satoshi is, because part of the mythology of Bitcoin is that it's mysterious who he put it. So Satoshi's like this Jesus-like figure. Yeah, it's really glorious. Anyway, so let me kind of, if I may, just kind of go through the structure of Bitcoin, explain why it works. So there are basically 5 parts to Bitcoin that I think we need to know about. The first one is that it works on the internet. And this is important because the internet is a global communication system, a global copy machine, basically, that allows us to reach unlimited numbers of people all over the world on an infinite basis. So that's very different from the physical world. in which you have to be in proximity with people in order to exchange property with them. He imagined that, look, let's just exchange property on the internet. It's a beautiful thing. The second thing is that he made his code open source. This is a little bit puzzling. When I say open source, how many do you feel in this room? Do you feel like you could give like a 1-minute description of what open source technology really is? Anybody feel like? I mean, I'm not going to ask you. You feel like you could, if under pressure. Okay. So
Yeah.
So open source technology is a little bit strange. It's something we're not entirely used to. Even in the libertarian world, we're used to thinking of everything as being belonging to like the state or to private parties. So like the roads outside of the potholes belong to the government, whereas the scarf belongs to me, right? And those are our two kinds of property we have tended to think exist. Well, open source technology really is a kind of, I would say, a third kind of property. It's a little bit like Wikipedia, right? Anybody can edit it, and but only the most meritorious of experts can prevail. So in open source technology, anybody can mix themselves with it. What this does is it extracts the best, most talented minds in the world to come together to make the technology as good as it possibly can be. So an open source technology is available to the whole world. This is it's a unique aspect of Bitcoin because it means that everybody can see it and understand it at any one moment. There's no audit Bitcoin movement. There doesn't have to be because anybody can download the program and look at it and see exactly what it's made of. Whereas with the Federal Reserve System, nobody knows what's going on, including the Federal Reserve itself. Absolutely no idea what's going on. So, open source technology is a very interesting case. I mean, in some ways, I wish that we could reclaim the word socialism, for ourselves, because I would say that open source technology is a form of like true socialism. It like belongs to the whole of humanity and to not any one particular institution. It belongs to everybody in the world, and the core developers, so-called team, earns its way into that position by being especially impressive and understanding it, because everybody has an interest in the technology being as good as possible. Open source modes of development have been a major driving force for the world economy for the last 10 years. Something like WordPress is an amazing technology. My own company, Liberty.me, I started building this world in WordPress, which like 10 years ago was something like a joke. Now it's amazing. And I'm scaling out a level of development within this open source technology that you would not believe. I mean, I've piled into this program a unified system of beautiful forums, encrypted chat, a social network, a publishing multi-site blogging system for every single member, for unlimited numbers of members. I mean, potentially 500,000 people could use this thing. And there's one other piece to it. Oh, and a news stream system. And I mean, several other amazing pieces. I look at this and I think I'm insane. I can't believe I just did this. But it's actually working, and it's fast, and it's amazing. All done on WordPress, open source technology, available to everybody. I mean, it's very interesting how people object to markets. Like rationalistically, they go, oh, well, that will never work. But open source technology is a good example of that. Like, you hear this description, oh, let's just throw the code out into the world and let's just let people pound on it and make it better. Oh, well, that system will surely never work. Like Wikipedia will never work. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, people were making fun of Wikipedia. Now we realize it's like the eighth wonder of the world, right? And it's the same thing with WordPress. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. So when Satoshi released his code, he just threw it out onto an open forum and said, if you like this stuff, use it. In the meantime, and his code was clean, and it was good, and it was well written, but about 75% of it, actually, has been rewritten by the developers themselves. So only about 25% of Satoshi's original code survives. Very interesting. Okay, what's another piece? Another piece is that he used a distributed network. What this means is that distributed network. What it means is that there would not just be one central location where the code would reside, but it would be available to anybody, any node in the world that wanted to download it. So you can be a network, you can be a network, and each one of you can be. The whole of the Bitcoin system can reside on your own laptop. It's an amazing thing. So there are potentially trillions and trillions of copies of any distributed network. And he used this system of network distribution to make sure that it could never be controlled centrally. What it means for us as lovers of liberty is immense. It means that governments can never, ever, ever crush it under any circumstances. I mean, you could get all the governments in the world to have a gigantic meeting that would set out to destroy a distributed network of any sort. They could destroy trillions and trillions of copies so long as there's one left anywhere. It can multiply itself on an infinite basis within seconds, thereby undoing all the work of governments just instantaneously. It's an uncrushable, uncontrollable system.
Like BitTorrents.
Like BitTorrents, yeah. When our friends at, what was the original file sharing system for music?
Napster.
Yeah, when Napster was taken down, all the government officials were like, that's the end. Kill this guy, we'll never face him again. Of course, now it's the basis of all distribution music in the world. It's pretty funny, the way governments have been constantly humiliated over the last 10 years. It's a beautiful thing to see, actually. I mean, more and more I'm thinking if I want government to come out against my company, desperately, because then I would be sure of success. So it's like the model that's Richard Nixon's where he would get rid of marijuana, for example. And this is the way it's working these days. Anyway, the distributed network protects it from power. This is the key that we're going to use to destroy. The nation state is dead with the distributed network. The first thing I would say is probably, let me just here, just some of these things. It's the blockchain. And this is the great innovation for Satoshi. What he did is he put a ledger in the cloud. This ledger was open source and was hosted by a distributed network. But the blockchain ledger, what it does is it keeps careful track of every single transaction. So every Bitcoin, or every fraction of Bitcoin, has a title associated with it. And every movement of any Bitcoin or fraction of a Bitcoin is tracked and chronicled in this ledger called the blockchain. And the identity of the owner of that Bitcoin or fraction of Bitcoin is identified through a public address that may or may not be connected to you personally. If I have a public address that I post on my Facebook account, then of course it's connected with me. If I don't ever post that public address, it's not ever connected with me. So it's not quite an anonymous system, but it's a pseudonymous system. The blockchain lasts forever. It's a great indestructible thing. You can look at it at any one time. You can look at the entire blockchain. You can download the entire blockchain. And on this ledger can contain an infinite amount of information about the transactions taking place. Plus, you can attach lots of things to each transaction itself. So you can attach messages, for example, of infinite length, basically. Short, long, anything. They can all exist on the blockchain. So it's pretty amusing, actually. Do you remember when the government very recently took down the Silk Road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And arrested my good friend Ross Ulbricht, who's now languishing in prison. I have many friends in prison these days. And he's at least out of solitary confinement, which is a lovely thing, actually. So probably he has friends in prison. But where was I going with that? Actually, I got distracted with. Yeah, the Silk Road. Oh yeah. So here's what happened. So they stole a lot of his coins, right? The government stole a lot of the coins that they could get to. I mean, he has probably something like $1 billion still in personal wealth that they can't access because he's stored his Bitcoins in a brain wallet, which is it got to be something like a 26 character password.
Wow.
And It's very difficult to get a 26-character password out of a guy if you're, for example, waterboarding him, you know, or drugging him or something like that. So I'm sure that Ross will never give up his 26-character brain wallet. I'm not even sure the government has any clue that this is even true. I mean, they don't even know what a brain wallet is.
Well, they do now.
Yeah, now they're right. The government's kind of lacking in brain wallets. So, but what I was going to say is they stole a lot of his coins. Actually, they didn't steal his coins. What they stole was a lot of the coins that were currently in process. Like if you were trying to buy a fake ID at the time from Silk Road, and your coins are being held in escrow, awaiting the arrival of the fake ID, so that you could say, you confirm that it arrived, so the coins could be released to the person who produced it for you. Those coins that were currently being held in escrow in the Silk Road system were confiscated when they arrested him and shut down the Silk Road, and those are the coins they stole. But and so they put them all into one big wallet, which is very interesting, actually, with the government owning this wallet. I forget now how many coins were there. So in the Bitcoin community, there was a lot of anger about this because the government basically stole everybody's money. You know, not just Ross's. Actually, they didn't get much of Ross's money at all. They stole just average people who were trying to buy pot or buy you know, whatever they were trying to buy. You know, some normal things and some unusual things. But the people who got their money stolen were in a position now to be able to send to the government's public wallet a tiny fraction of Bitcoin and attach a note to it. So you can actually go to the real blockchain right now and look and see that there are like tens of thousands of angry messages directly to the Bitcoin wallet, and it's really fun to read. It's really great. So anyway, on this blockchain, it can host an unbelievable amount of information. It's an incredible innovation, and what the blockchain essentially does is prevent double spending. So that if I have a Bitcoin, I can't send it to Joe and Mary at the same time. I mean, you can send it to Joe or to Mary, but not to both. And if Mary sends it to Joe, then Joe has it and Mary doesn't have it. There's no way that you can reproduce Bitcoins because the system is so strict. If there's any evidence of double spending at all, well, it can't basically take place. But even if there's a slight confusion over the verification of any transactions, immediately a fork develops in the blockchain, and that's resolved by the blockchain, by the core developers who are verifying transactions. This happened only, to my knowledge, one time, and it happened about last April in 2013, when there was some confusion. A new group of coins had been introduced into the system, and there was some temporary confusion about whether or not this new block had been confirmed enough times, and a fork developed. The price of Bitcoin fell dramatically over the course of 20 minutes. The blockchain the new coins were re-verified, reconfirmed, and reintegrated into the main blockchain. The price recovered and everything went back to normal after 20 minutes. The whole system is self-correcting. But this blockchain itself that prevents Bitcoin from doing basically what the Federal Reserve does, which is just producing unlimited amounts of coins. So when Satoshi put together his system, he wrote the protocol of the blockchain to only allow, I think it's 21 million total coins that will ever be created, and the last of them will emerge in 2140. So I think we'll all be expired from this work, unless medical technology gets really amazing. So there's an upper limit on the number of coins. The early creators of coins had it very easy to create them. The hashing rate to solving the algorithms that generate the coins, therefore the profits of the people who are verifying the transactions, was very low. You could do it on your laptop computer. But the typical creation rate is something like 25 coins every 10 minutes or something like that. The more people who are involved in verification, the more difficult the algorithms become to actually dig up the Bitcoins themselves. So in so many ways, what Satoshi did is he replicated the gold standard. It's exactly like it was in California, you know, after the Civil War, when there's a big gold rush in California and people went out there, oh, there's gold in their hills, you know, And so first you're digging it out of the rivers, and it's very easy to find, but once all that's gone, then you have to actually dig into the mountains, and then you get the first round, and then the higher the price of gold gets, the more you can afford to mine it, and you have to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. That's exactly the same system that Satoshi set up to make Bitcoin work. So he modeled the entire thing on a digital version of the gold standard. This is what convinced me. I was very much a skeptic of Bitcoin for like 2 years because I didn't know what the hell it was. I thought it was just another file type, and I didn't want to learn about it because it sounded hard to me. But when I discovered that there's an upward limit on the number of Bitcoins and that Bitcoin basically reproduces a system of property rights, the same thing as we have in the physical world, I got interested in it because I realized, oh my God, this could actually be an improvement. The final thing that he embedded in this is cryptography. So cryptography is interesting. It's a system of communication that allows you to share only the information you want to share and nothing other than you want to share with another party. And the way I was explaining it to somebody last night, and it was just spontaneous, I tried to explain it this way. It's like I was talking to somebody at the bar, and I said, well, imagine you speak some language I don't understand, and I speak some language that you don't understand. But we both have this black box that's standing between us, and I can speak into the box, and it converts it into your language, and it spits out to you in a way that you can understand. You can speak back into the black box, it converts it into my language in a way that I can understand. But even so, we can still stand in front of each other and not understand each other. We have to have this black box. That's what cryptography basically does. It allows you to have, it's a code-based system, as you might imagine. It's a system of scrambling information. It only spits out what's necessary for you to know. So in the Satoshi's version of public key cryptography, you have a public key that you use, and the other person has a public key that you use, but your own wallet in your blockchain contains your private key. And the private key is necessary to descramble the information to deliver it to some other public key. Their private key is necessary to receive information from your public key to descramble it for them to understand. So that way you can communicate this information back and forth without actually giving up your identity or anything else associated with that. This is immense and hugely important because of what it makes possible is peer-to-peer transactions. This is, I would say, the #1 innovation of blockchain of Bitcoin. Because what it means is that we can exchange real property in real time without going to a third party. That is gigantic. And that's what's fundamentally different about Bitcoin versus every single other existing payment system in the world. Every other payment system uses some third party. So if you're using, like, for example, Visa, you go to buy something online with Visa, you're not actually moving money anywhere. You're not exchanging money. What you're doing is entering into a trust relationship. So that Visa agrees to vouch for your character and your ability to pay, and they pay the company that you're buying something from, and then at a later time, you pay Visa. But it's requiring this third party. But in the course of this third party transaction, what have you given up? You've given up the whole of your identity. You give up your credit card information, which is connected to your name, which is connected to your address, connected to your social security number, your bank account information, your medical records, essentially the whole of everything you are, just to buy a pair of earbuds from Amazon, okay? It's just a ridiculous system. And the possibilities for fraud here are immense. I mean, it's extremely scary when you consider the, 100 million credit cards that a company like iTunes has on its accounts right now. I mean, this is an unbelievable security risk that could just blow up in our faces instantaneously. I mean, it's not a viable system. It's old-fashioned. This is a system that we've hacked together for the internet age to make what was basically a 1950s innovation, the credit card, work in a digital economy. I mean, the early days of the internet, credit card companies weren't even sure they were going to allow this to happen. Do you remember when this happened? It was very strange. It's like, And even now, you have to wonder, like, why do I have to carry my credit card around to shop physically? And they're like looking at your driver's license and making all this big fuss about who you are, you know. But you can go online and just, you know, type and buy anything you want. I mean, it's a little bit crazy, right?
We do that with the boss's credit card at work all the
Yeah.
time because we can't take it to the store, but we can go online, order it, and go to the
That's
store.
right. It doesn't make any sense. This is a goofy, anachronistic system that's been basically hacked and hacked and hacked again to work in the internet age. And it doesn't really work. Cryptography makes it possible to actually exchange real property online in real time with anybody instantly. And I realized it's the first time I ever had Bitcoin. And I'll get to the other advantages of this peer-to-peer system in a second, which is immense. But when I first received my first Bitcoin, it was about a year and a month ago. So some Bitcoin entrepreneur really, really wanted to buy my time. So he agreed to pay me in Bitcoin, and I downloaded my first wallet. I took off my time. I sold it for like 3 Bitcoin, which is kind of that's an expensive time. It's about $1,800 today. But so I traveled home from the conference, and I had this Bitcoin in my wallet, and I thought, well, I want to do something with this. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just Googled up something like Bitcoin store, and at that time there was a Bitcoin store that was already available. Nowadays, everything's much more advanced. You know, it's just 12 months. The whole world has just changed, you know, dramatically. But 12 months ago, it was a little bit primitive, you know. And so I went to the Bitcoin store, and the very first product that I saw was a pair of crimping pliers. And it was up in the top left-hand corner, and I thought, well, I don't really care what I want to buy. I just want to try these things out. So I just, you know, I clicked, I want these crimping pliers. I don't need crimping pliers, but I just wanted to try out my Bitcoin. And it asked my address, because they have to have somewhere to deliver the thing. So I put in my address, and they said, well, okay, here's your QR code. And they threw up the code, and I was able to take out my wallet, scan it, poof, it populated my wallet with the actual price, which was $13 or whatever it was. Probably 1 Bitcoin at that point. And I pressed send, and that was it. Poof, and it went away. And it took like no time whatsoever. I didn't pay transaction fees. The merchant didn't pay any transaction fees. The property was exchanged directly from me to the merchant without any third-party intervention at all. I didn't have to give up any details about my identity. There was absolutely no chance for fraud. It's 100% secure and super instant and actually extremely cool in addition to everything else. And I got up from my chair around the dining room table and just did like this jazzy dance around it because I knew immediately that I had entered into the future. I mean, this is the future of our monetary system. The existing system cannot sustain itself in light of what Bitcoin is and does. It's unbelievable. So, and this is why I would like to get to this other point about cryptography. Well, about all these things, really. I mean, the fact that the internet exists itself is a great miracle of our time. I mean, it's going to be really obvious several generations from now that every period of history before 1995 was basically the Dark Ages. You know, we like to describe the Dark Ages as like the 5th century to the 14th century or something like that. Not true. It's everything before 1995. Nobody knew a damn thing about anything. Came on. And that was the beginning of the train of history. That was the great hinge. Everything changed. Open source technology is a new form of property. It's neither public nor private. It belongs to the whole of humanity, but not the government. It's unbelievable. In some ways, the communist ideal actually coming to life. It's I would say not communist really. It's more Hayekian than anything else. The distributed network cannot be shut down by any government. It absolutely disables the nation state and makes the nation state an anachronism. This is more powerful. The distributed network is more powerful than all the governments in the world combined. It's humanity itself. Unbelievable. The blockchain, I'll get to that in a second because we've just begun. And cryptography is what makes it possible for any two individuals to exchange in an economic relationship with each other without third parties. We are very, very lucky in this room. We all are part of the first world, and we all more or less have credit cards and bank accounts and all this kind of stuff because we live near banks and we're like cool and we're rich and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Most people in the world I would say a third of humanity is not as fortunate as we are. They don't live near banks, they don't have credit cards, and they have no access to becoming part of the worldwide global division of labor. And we have to think about this. We're talking about whole continents and vast amounts of people in the world. Even today, if I went to Brazil, which I'm going in a couple of weeks, and I tried to buy an iPad from Amazon, they would not be able to sell it to me because I'm in Brazil, because my IP address would have been blocked. And you realize this when you're a merchant in the world of the internet, that you have to block a huge number of IP addresses all over the world because the fraud associated with those IP addresses is too large. But what you're doing is basically denying opportunities to millions of people, billions of people, who cannot become part of the worldwide division of labor because they don't have access, because they're living in a bad IP address, because they don't have banks, because they don't have a credit card. And this is very cruel and very anachronistic and outrageous, actually. So if we can fire up this system of cryptography and peer-to-peer networks that live on distributed networks with open source technology and live on the internet and operate through the blockchain, what it means is that probably 2 or 3 billion people in the whole world are going to the first time going to be given access to economic opportunity for the first time ever.
Wow.
So it's a little bit like lifting the iron curtain, whether like in Eastern Germany and Eastern Europe, or when China reformed its economy for the first time. You know, billions of new people were introduced into the global system of economic exchange. And that led to a burst of prosperity in the 1990s like we'd never seen before, and nobody would have expected it. So if we can fire up the system and make it live all over the world, billions of people are now going to suddenly have things to book, what they're going to want to buy and things they're going to want to sell. And for the first time, be allowed to integrate their lives with ours. That is going to be unbelievable. So, I mean, you have to think out here 20 or 30 years. I'm, in the short term, very bearish on the global economy. I think the welfare states are crushing us. Government money is a disaster. Trade protectionism is terrible. But this technology continues to advance. We're going to see an explosion of prosperity like we've never seen ever before. Because the whole world will be integrated in a great global peer-to-peer exchange system like we've never seen before. And human energy is going to be poured into the great productive effort of building civilization. And it's going to shock and amaze people all over the world. Because right now, that is not our system. We live in a system of a world governed by nation states that's extremely exclusive of the poor and marginalized around the world. This kind of technology actually makes this possible. Okay, that's the basic structure of the Bitcoin protocol. Let me just talk now a little bit about the industry itself. Because I know recently we've gone through this whole bit with Mt. Gox failing and everybody's freaking out. You know, it's just so interesting to me how scared of capitalism everybody is. You know, it's like, you know, people expect technology to descend from a cloud, like complete and finalize. I remember the first time before he died, I was trying to explain the internet to my father. I said, Dad, this internet is a wonderful thing. You can just like practically look up anything, which I shouldn't have said because this was something like 1998. And he typed in what he wanted to know from the internet, which is something out of his own PhD dissertation, you know, and came up with nothing. And walked away from the computer and goes, well, see, you can see it's completely worthless. And that was it. You know, that was the way he judged the internet, was on his own experience very early on in the process. And that's a lot of the way people judge Bitcoin nowadays, you know. It's the same way that people used to judge electricity in the Gilded Age, you know. One house would put in electrical wiring and it would like go up in flames, you know. I want nothing to do with electricity. There's clearly no future to that crap. You know, or in the case of railroads, one railroad would dive off, you know, some poorly built bridge and plunge into the river, killing hundreds of people. And people figured, well, we better have nothing to do with railroads ever again. This is the way humanity is. You know, we're just terrified of any flaws in new technology. But you know what? New technology, it's always flawed. It's always kind of catastrophic, actually. And, there's always trains leaping up. There's always house fires as a result of electricity. There's always planes falling out of skies. I mean, this is the nature of progress itself. It's gritty, it's scary, it's risky, it's dangerous, and it's not for the faint of heart. But it's going to happen, and it always does happen. Whether you embrace it or not, it is relentlessly marching forward. And it's the key to progress itself. It's why we enjoy prosperity. It's one of the great ironies of technology that's so scary and so dangerous and so fraught with possibility of error and failure, and yet it is the thing that keeps us alive and gives us the lifestyles that we have. I mean, you've all used buggy software, right? I hope you have, because any software that's not buggy is probably so old-fashioned it's useless.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, all software has to be buggy. That's the nature of progress itself. So it is with Bitcoin. You know, Mt. Gox was run by a bunch of young punks who used to play a game called Magic: The Online Gathering. And you like Magic: The Online Gathering?
I really like our game.
Yeah, okay, well, that was the origin of Bitcoin, right? So what happened was Magic: The Online Gathering, you trade these cards have value, and then eventually the people that were playing Magic: The Online Gathering were playing on the internet, and they wanted to be able to trade cards geographically non-contiguous basis. So they would trade these tokens back and forth, okay? And these guys in Japan who eventually took over Mt. Gox, Mt. Gox stands for Magic: The Online, Magic: The Gathering Online Exchange, right? They were not prepared to run a global system, a new global monetary system. Dumb kids. I mean, they still are, really. I mean, I know that they've done terrible things. My heart goes out to them because, I mean, they didn't know that Bitcoin was going to go from being, you know, worth absolutely zero to achieving dollar parity in 2 years. I mean, how are they going to know that? I mean, it's just crazy. And they got in too deep too fast, and they were wiped out. But you know, this is not unusual. In the 1980s, lots of, I owned a Commodore 64. It was one of the very first early computers that came out. The Commodore company dominated the world, you know, for like 10 years, and then made a lot of big errors and screwed up and like went totally bankrupt in a calamitous, disastrous corporate bankruptcy. You know, this is just what happens. This is called creative destruction. So we're getting rid of the bad actors in the Bitcoin community and getting more. I was just at a big Texas Bitcoin conference where there are about 1,000 exhibitor companies. As far as I could tell, about 750 of them have been established within the last 12 months. This is the world we're moving into right now. There's a giant corporate infrastructure that's emerging. Some of the smartest, most entrepreneurial, risk-taking, daring, brilliant people in the world are entering into the space of Bitcoin. And they're applying all their energy. So what are we in store for? By the way, let me just back up, and I just want to say two more things. What is the source of Bitcoin's value? Everybody wonders, why is this worth anything? This is the most common question I get. I mean, there's an economist who wrote an article saying that Bitcoin is worthless because it's made of ones and zeros and digits, and therefore it's just utterly meaningless and doesn't really exist. So I called him up on Skype and I said, Frank, you say that Bitcoin doesn't mean anything, it doesn't really exist. What do you have to say about this conversation we're having right now? Do you think this conversation exists? Actually, well, sure, we're talking, right? I can see you. I said, well, do you understand? This is just like Bitcoin. This is just digits. Like, I'm not actually talking to you, right? I mean, we're just communicating through digital networks. This is all just code, really. Do you get that? I do not understand what you mean. I just couldn't understand that the world economy is driven by digits today. So what gave Bitcoin its value? When it first came out in January of 2009, it had a value of 0. By October 5th of that year, it had a value of about 1/100 of 1 penny, okay? That was the first time. So the question is, why did it obtain its first value? And the answer is, and please remember this, the value of the payment system itself. Bitcoin is not just a money, it is also a payment system. These two things are united into one technology. No other money in the world does this, unites a payment system and money. It's the value of the payment system as a service that gave value to the money itself. Because over those 8 months, people would trade on the blockchain back and forth. Here's my coin, here's my coin, here's my coin. And it always worked. It always worked. And then it became obvious over the course of 8 months, oh my God, this system could actually be a new money value. Suddenly it's a price. And then February 2011, dollar parity. You know, we attained the price of $1. This time last year, maybe not this time last year, like a month ago last year, it was worth about $12. This time last year, it was worth about $30. By the end of April, it already soared up to like $262, and it crashed again to $80, and everybody said, "Oh, Bitcoin's dead." And every time something disastrous happens with Bitcoin, they always say this. Like 2 weeks ago, no, it was a week ago, Slate magazine had a big article about Bitcoin bites the dust. I mean, it's always the same thing. It's the honey badger. It doesn't even care about Slate or the Washington Post or the New York Times or anybody else. Nothing else matters. Okay, one final thing I just want to leave you with, and it has to do with this blockchain itself. There were two parts, there were three parts of Bitcoin that came out. One was the money, right? The second thing was the payment system. The third thing is the scripting language. Okay? These two parts were released. They're still in beta today. This part was never released as part of Bitcoin because it was just a little bit worrying, and the developers decided not to release it at all. This scripting language has now been taken over by new systems like, there are many new systems that are using scripting language. But what it does is create an automatic self-governing system for contract enforcement, so-called smart contracts. So it's an automatic escrow system that doesn't involve third parties, so that I can make a contract with you, we exchange the property. Once you're satisfied, your end of the deal has been satisfied, has been achieved, then you let that be known to me. And once the property exchange really physically takes place in real life, the contract is extinguished. And if it doesn't take place, then it's enforced by giving back that property. This is what smart property is all about. This is what the scripting language does. If you consider the implications of this for things like futures markets, stock markets, insurance, and every other kind of dealing we have one with another as cooperative human beings, and consider that this can take place on a geographic, non-contiguous basis, you begin to understand that this little third part of the scripting language of Bitcoin that exists within the blockchain is capable of becoming a new form of law for the world and displacing every service the government provides. So if you want to understand where we're headed to a world essentially governed by code, a world that doesn't need governance, where third parties are completely extinguished and that ultimate egregious, evil third party called the state becomes completely irrelevant to our lives. This is the potential of the blockchain. I know that sounds a little shocking. We're talking about 20, 25, maybe 30 years from now. That's where we're headed. Remember, folks, that it took about 20 years for email to go from the state of being existent, used only among the elite, only among the geeks, to being used by grandmother and granddad to communicate with their grandkids. It took 20 years. 20 years from now, this blockchain could actually become our new government of the world. It could be our new source of law, and it could completely displace this nation state that was basically more or less invented about 200 years ago, became Leviathan about 100 years ago. I believe these are all temporary institutions. Technology will replace them, make them irrelevant. We're entering into a new period of global anarchism where we develop peer-to-peer. We exchange peer-to-peer with each other. It's a world much more like the pre-nation state age of the late Middle Ages of, say, the 14th and 15th century, that exists in the 21st century, where we have the technology to have peace, cooperation, mutual prosperity among all people in the world. That's where we're going. It's not going to come down as a top-down reform. No congressman or senator understands a word of what I just said. They will not give us this world. Politics will not save us. The geeks will save us. That's our hope. And I believe that's a great promise of the future.
All right, we have time for questions.
Please.
Would you like to take them, or?
No, I'm glad to, no, just, yeah, we just have a discussion, don't have to do
Before we do
it.
answer any questions,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to see a more in-depth version of this talk, there will be one at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor tomorrow. It's in Angel Hall, Auditorium C, at 6:30 p.m. And do have a Facebook page up there, and it's expected to be a much bigger event, and we'll be raffling off some of Jeffrey's books.
Yeah, good.
Oh, I do have to.
It's all the stuff, I hope I didn't absolutely shock you, but I have an obligation to tell you what's true. And this is what's true. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's true?
Well, everything I just said.
Oh, okay. My question was, I know that at a lot of the Bitcoin conferences and things that have been going on, there's a lot of talk about regulation.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk
so
about that?
The government can regulate Bitcoin, but in a strange way. Like, what part of Bitcoin can they regulate? Pretty much the coming and going of national currencies to and from Bitcoin. That's the federal control. So, for example, it'd be very simple for the federal government to say to American banks, you may not accept any dollar deposits from any Bitcoin exchange. I mean, that can happen very easily. That's a way in which they could regulate Bitcoin. They can also, the IRS could tax Bitcoin profits, you know? There's a lot of things you could do, but all the things that the government control are all dollar related. And the irony of this kind of government regulations, actually, it's a little bit like what we talked about with Napster. The more they do to regulate Bitcoin, the more they create a disincentive to ever leave the Bitcoin ecosystem. So once you enter into it, then you don't have any reason ever to convert back to dollars. The less regulated it is, the more fluid the relationship between national money and Bitcoin will be. The more regulated it is, the more people just figure out how is national money alternative from Bitcoin. I mean, I face this problem myself every day, right? Because I've got by now quite, I mean, just like inadvertently, because I'm not a miner or anything, quite a lot of Bitcoin. And I face the problem, like, do I want to convert it to dollars and spend it like in the normal sort of American way? Or do I want to spend it as Bitcoin? And the more regulations that are tacked on, the less the reason I ever have to leave the Bitcoin economy. I mean, I can get paid in Bitcoin, I can use Bitcoin. I mean, a young married couple I know has been living exclusively on Bitcoin for about 9 months.
Oh wow, that's like those people who exclusively lived on shopping online when that first came out.
Yeah, shopping online. Yeah. They take their plane flights and they found a Bitcoin gas station and their landlord accepts Bitcoin, and you know, so this is, the more the government cracks down, the more they propel the future ahead. So this is the great irony, and this is why actually Ben Bernanke is very reluctant. In all of his public statements about Bitcoin, he's been very cautious and very friendly and very sweet.
Yeah, I have wondered that.
Yeah, this is why.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because everything these bastards do like backfires, and they don't want it just to backfire. It was weird to be part of the government now. It's like your wishes never come true, like ever. And so it's like whatever you wish for, the opposite happens. So it starts to get a little spooky as a government regulator after a while. It's like whatever you wish for, just count on the opposite happening. So they want to kill Bitcoin. They're probably going to, propel it into being the global net. This is the other thing. A global economy wants a global money. We don't have one right now. All monies are national money. Bitcoin has the possibility of being a truly international currency. That's a beautiful thing. It's in that very way, it kind of replicates the gold standard. We want that. I mean, the global economy is desperate for it. We need it. I mean, the markets have been begging for this for so long. And I believe that the time has already arrived. And it's weird to me because I'm like embedded in this world for like 12 months watching the scale of development. It's just amazing. Just amazing to see a sector go from being a weird, like, geeky interest to becoming, like, mainstream and having this gigantic global infrastructure and to actually becoming a safe haven for the world's wealth, which is where we are today. Go ahead.
I wanted you to touch base on a little on Bitcoin mining. How does that?
So, the mining, we only use the term mining. It's really a metaphor to kind of replicate this idea of the gold standard and the miners chipping away in their Levi jeans or whatever. But really, what mining is Satoshi understood economics pretty well. He understood the need to incentivize the verification. There has to be somebody to maintain the blockchain. Not somebody, but really people to volunteer the processing power to run the blockchain, right? There has to be some reason to give up the resources of your processing power to run the blockchain. Otherwise, it would just die. So what he did is he came up with a system of two ways to pay people who are using their processing power to run this blockchain, which gets ever larger and larger and larger. The first one is transaction fees, which are so negligible, really. You don't even notice them. At least I don't notice them. But the miners are paid, or the verifiers are paid in transaction fees whenever a transaction takes place. Any of the people who are confirming the transaction are getting paid. I should be clear, when I'm talking about people, I don't really mean people. I mean people who own machines, right? Like nobody's sitting down with a pen and paper doing math problems. Okay, so these are people who are volunteering their processing power. And that processing power is also used to solve the algorithms that generate the new coins that arrive in blocks every 10 minutes. And they come in clumps of 25 coins. And the coins have to belong to somebody, right? Then they just don't go out into the open air. They arrive in the hands of the people who are doing the verification, or the processing power that does the verification. So it's one and the same process. They go together. That's called mining. And nowadays, mining is not profitable like at all. I mean, it is if you have a lot of money. The newest mining equipment will cost you about $25,000, $30,000. And it will pay off in something like 8 months to a year, depending on the price of Bitcoin. In the early days of Bitcoin mining, you could make you could make a lot of Bitcoin very quickly with just a laptop computer, but now it's just completely impossible. People like mining, which is one of the reasons I'm actually a little bit bullish on altcoins, like Litecoin and Dogecoin, and these kinds of things, because they're easy to mine, and anybody can mine them. And it's fun to make money out of your computer. It's fun to turn on your machine and watch it make money. I mean, that's really fun. It's like the old alchemist dream or something. So
can I just piggyback on that
Yeah.
about the source? Because that's where some of my questions were. They constantly expanding, so you're saying that the mining the right to control the register is essentially the present value of the future stream, given that we know the end date.
yeah, that very well could be. I think that's why we can always anticipate that the price of Bitcoin is always going, in terms of dollars, is always going to go up. Yeah, I would say you're an economist, right? I mean, nobody else talks like that. I think that's the reason why we can expect.
But that would be why the other ones
Exactly.
don't have the
Precisely.
security of that, have the possibility for rents to be
Yeah,
made.
yeah, they're infinite. Like Dogecoin is infinitely inflatable currency. There's no end to it.
So by getting in first, you get to reap the rents of the.
Yeah,
You
it's
like
not-
the government off of running hyperinflation.
basically, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you get in first, right? Whereas with Bitcoin, everybody's in it now. It's really like the last time I used the analogy that if you had a soda or like a malt, on a table, and one guy's sucking out of it with a straw, and then everybody says, well, it's good, and then there's more and more straws shoved into there, then you're going to get ever less, right? So then you have to give ever larger straws, and I don't know, but I think the analogy breaks down at some point. So basically, you can't make any money mining Bitcoin at all anymore. Although, let me tell you, I saw there are several businesses now that have opened up in China. Here's, God, you just can't believe what's going on. So you've got these very smart business people that are shopping all around the world for the cheapest electricity that you can find. And they're opening up buildings this size that have nothing but mining equipment. And what they're doing is selling shares in the results, which you can buy at a monthly fee. And it's just, it's unbelievable. This is a complete transformation. Like a year ago, I had a friend of mine who was building his own mining equipment out of old computer parts in his own dormitory. Actually, it was an apartment unit. And he built all these racks everywhere and was putting up and he was mining Bitcoin. And his electricity bill was $3,000 one month, but he had made about $10,000 in Bitcoin, so he didn't mind paying the bill. But the police were a little puzzled by this. Because the electric company notified them. Notified the police, and they came knocking on.
Oh no.
Listen, sorry to bother you, sir, but your electric bill was $3,000. We were just wondering what's going on here. He said, "Well, come on in." And
Oh no.
I said, "Well, what are all these machines doing?" He said, "Well, they're solving math problems." I said, "Well, thanks very much, sir." But now this is a major industrial operation, mining for Bitcoin, and it's so funny to me. Back in the old days of the gold standard, the opponents of the gold standard used to just rail against the social costs and resources that were going into mining gold. They would say, "This is a stupid system. We are spending billions of dollars digging gold out of mountains. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just print money out of the government and would save society so much in resources?" Well, this is a mistake, actually, because money has to be scarce, and you want a system where you have to actually spend resources to get it, right? What's exactly the same thing going on right now in the Bitcoin community. If you want to read some hysterical rhetoric against Bitcoin, go to any of the radical environmentalist websites. They are very unhappy about
Gosh, I never
mining.
thought of that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, you've got vast amounts of resources being expended right now, and ever more so. And what's it going to be like in 21? Because half of the world's electricity is going to go to Bitcoin mining. I don't know, but it's a little bit weird. And you can see why people are a little bit annoyed. It's pretty funny. Go ahead.
But are they? This is more of a piggyback of that. But so is there any counter on the environmentalist sector where at least we're getting away from paper money? I mean, they still have to use an inordinate amount of supplies, trees, all stuff, even though they use it for cotton.
Well, I mean, paper money squanders vast resources. I mean, I'd rather spend the money mining gold than have the world destroyed for paper money. Basically, that's the choice we face, and that's essentially what happened. And I think that would be my answer. But I understand. I mean, I'm a little bit amused by